what's up with the, where is Rock the Vote involved in today's election?
Yeah, so there's elections everywhere, it feels like. I think we send out emails and text messages to voters in about 350 different citywide, local races, and then statewide in Virginia. And we actually have programs actively working in 25 cities right now for mayoral races, and then we're all across the state in Virginia.
Yeah. Give us a sense of the dimension of the young vote. I mean, what was it in 2012?
Yeah, of course. I'm like a walking
okay.
encyclopedia of youth vote data, right?
Good.
There's a few things that are interesting about the youth vote right now that I think will be really exaggerated in Virginia, and then we'll keep seeing the impact of. And one is just the size. So they made up about 20% of the electorate, so 1 in 5 votes. They are growing.
In 2012?
In 2012.
Wow, that's huge.
And they're growing. It's huge. It's huge. And we expect them to be at least a quarter of the vote by the next presidential election. Every day there's about 12,000 kids turning 18. It's the baby boomers' children. It's the largest generation our country's ever seen, and they keep entering the electorate, and they're only about halfway there. So
how do you define the youth vote? Up to what age?
We're going 18 to 29.
18 to 29.
Mm-hmm. So voters under 30.
Right.
And they're super diverse as well, just racially diverse. And we're looking at huge populations of Latino youth who are eligible to vote, as well as Asian American youth.
And on the issues, right? I mean, they see things a lot differently.
They do. They're very different than their kind of older brothers and sisters of Gen X. They are...
Not to mention their parents.
Their parents, their grandparents.
I mean, I think particularly about the issue of marriage equality, for example, right?
A lot of these social issues are very personal issues for them. So marriage equality, even we're seeing amongst young women, the abortion issue, women's rights issues, really motivating them to go to the polls and show up right now in a state like Virginia. And even economic issues, they have been hit so hard by the recession and continue to struggle. So they are, they care. So this whole apathetic thing always drives me crazy. And we're seeing them more than other generations turn towards political participation as a pathway for solution.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. And so... Because what you hear, the rap you hear is that young people today just don't give a damn, right? They're not out there in the streets the way they were in the 60s against the war in Vietnam. And so they're not involved, whatever, their noses in their books or their heads in the clouds full of pot or something. But not true, you're saying.
No, I mean, you go out and spend 10 minutes on a college campus or in a community college setting or with midnight basketball game and talk to these young people. Of course they care, but their participation looks very different than it did in the 60s and 70s, and so sometimes that's hard to understand or translate. But they are voting at record rates compared to previous generations. And then in the early 90s, for example, turnout amongst young people was 36%. In the last election, it was nearly 50%. So,
whoa!
And they're bigger, right? So their impact is real, and they know that.
And do you find that political parties and politicians recognize this and are responding, or do they sort of ignore it?
Yeah, it's a change that's been slow in coming, because I would say if you talk to these young people, they turn out. And Rock the Vote's a perfect example. We registered 1 million young voters in the last election. We talked to all of them. We ran our programs, and they turned out at close to 80%. If you run these programs, it works. But the candidates, there's still this conventional wisdom. They might not show up, so why bother spending resources? I will tell you, in Virginia, because of their size and because of their trending demographics in the state and how they're voting, we saw the candidates for really the first time take it seriously. And we saw Obama do it, of course, but in a statewide race, where in the last month or so, we saw Terry McAuliffe make 22 community college campus visits. We saw in the last week Bill Clinton touring 5 college campuses. So in the final days, when those final minutes actually count, where you spend your dollars and resources, where you put one of your top surrogates, and they're targeting young people, and I think that says something.
Yeah, they're not going to these schools just because they happen to have big gyms or something, right? They're going there because these are potential voters.
They're talking about youth issues, and that's different too. They're talking about young people being the most uninsured when it comes to healthcare. They're talking about student loans. They're talking about women's rights issues. And so they're not using this as as you said, a location, but instead going there to actually engage and speak to these voters.
And is there any? I know you know the answer because you are a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the youth vote.
Something I'm very proud of.
Good. From a party point of view, do they tend to be more Republican, more Democrat, libertarian, independent? Yeah. What do you see?
Yeah. Well, if you just take the last presidential election, they voted about 60% for Obama. In Virginia, they actually voted 1 point higher, so 61% for Obama. And let's use Virginia as an example or a case study. In the 96 election, for example, they voted about 10 points for the Republican candidate, voters under 30. Around 2000, 2004, it was split about 50-50. And now you're seeing as this new generation, the millennials, kind of come of age and enter the electorate, they're flipping it, and now they're voting 25 points for the Democrats.
So with Rock the Vote, when you're involved in these mayoral races, are you involved to endorse a particular candidate or just to get the vote out?
It's all about youth power. It's about making sure these young people, as they turn 18 each day, get registered, understand the power they have, figure out who's on the ballot and how to navigate this process. It's like a really fun civics lesson, ensuring that they have the tools they need to make up their own minds, and then helping and ensuring that they show up. So those that we elect are responsive to these issues that
So you
really
don't
matter.
just support Democrats. You're not like Emily's List, which just supports women, but women Democrats,
We
right?
support young people.
You support young people. You support young people getting them involved in the process. Do you support young people running for office?
No, we haven't done that. We try to kind of keep ourselves in this very nonpartisan space and say to our audience, listen, there's 46 million of you. You can make up your own minds. Yeah. We're not going to tell you what to do. And that's actually part of the process, right? Figuring out what it is you stand for and kind of holding those values true, figuring out how to go out and exercise your voice. So,
do you see a lot of young people, Tea Party members? I think of the Tea Party movement as pretty white and pretty old. Is it?
We don't run into them very often. And
young Tea Partiers.
Young Tea Partiers, yeah. I've been in Virginia a lot, so I'm thinking about the state a lot.
Yeah.
There's one university down there, Liberty, which is incredibly conservative. So they have, there are pockets of conservative youth, and we hope they get out there. And, we have debate about the best ideas to address the issues facing young people. But overall, they're voting 60+% for Democrats, and they're identifying a little less, a lot more independence, but their values are very progressive right now as a generation.
And do you find that many of them are like putting in, two things. I wanted to ask you about, are they putting in time? But first, let me go back and ask the most basic question. Do they care about politics?
Yeah, they do.
Do they follow
They're disgusted by it a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially, again, it's like they're so close right now, being just outside the Beltway, the government shutdown, the kind of rocky start to the healthcare rollout, all this stuff, and they look at it and go, like, could you just please get something right?
Yeah, right. Get something done.
Get something done. That's probably more like it. And there's this frustration. And the response, which I'm actually a little surprised by, instead of saying, so we're out of here, has been a lot more, we got to take this back. We got to work to make this our own. We've got to kind of take the keys back from our parents because they aren't doing such a good job. And maybe feel a little bit more like the grown-ups at the table than the young people themselves.
And does that lead to actually volunteering for a campaign, walking precincts, making phone calls, or just kind of doing it? Or voting is the most important thing.
That's right. But it's, go to rockthevote.com throughout the day and you'll see all these stories. We've got... we put a call out for student leaders in Virginia and said, if you're doing something cool around the elections, let us know and we'll support you. Yeah. We ended up with 15 fellows working at, twice as many campuses across the state. And today alone, they've got, bands playing on campuses and parties at the polls, and they're door knocking and precinct walking. And it's it's going to be a real show of youth vote power.